My name is Margaret, 23 years old, and I recently graduated with honors in technology engineering from a university in Massachusetts. On my graduation day, no one from my family attended. No flowers, no congratulations, not even a proud glance. Just a text from my mother. Your father says that since you chose your own path, you should take full responsibility for it. That evening, I returned home, standing in the middle of the vast mansion I once called home, a cold space where everything gleamed under crystal chandeliers but held not a trace of warmth. My father stood at the top of the staircase, his gray suit crisply pressed, holding a glass of red wine that I knew he never actually drank, just for show. "So you're really turning down the position at the company?" he asked, his tone flat, as if he were reading the morning paper. "Yes, I don't want to work in finance. I want to pursue energy engineering research," I replied, keeping my voice steady. His eyes were cold as stone. "Engineering?" He pronounced each syllable as if I had just declared I wanted to become a magician. "Aren't you ashamed of betraying the family tradition? From your grandfather to me, the entire Preston lineage has thrived on finance. Investing is in our blood. And you? You want to be an engineer? Some mechanic assembling machines." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I want to create something with real value. I don't want to just shift money from one account to another." He scoffed, his laughter echoing in the luxurious but empty space. Then, as if he had been waiting for this moment, he reached into his suit pocket, pulled out a wad of small bills, and tossed them onto the marble floor right at my feet. "Here, $200. That's all someone like you is worth. No more trust fund, no more Preston name, nothing." I watched the bills flutter to the ground like dry autumn leaves, cold, weightless, and devoid of emotion. It wasn't the money itself that hurt. It was the way he threw it, as if I were nothing more than a failed product being discarded. My mother stood a few steps away, holding her second cocktail of the afternoon. She said nothing, just looked at me with an expression that was both cold and pitying. No defense, no "I'll talk to your father," just silence. So long and heavy that it ached. I bent down, picked up the bills, placed them in my wallet, then stood up, my eyes never leaving my father's. "Thank you, Father," I said slowly. "I will turn this $200 into something greater than you ever imagined." He flicked his hand toward the door, signaling the end of the performance in which he had played director. "Get out of my house. You're no longer a Preston." I pulled my only suitcase through the door without looking back. The heavy oak door closed behind me with a deep thud, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of something entirely new. I stepped down the stone staircase, where the car I had used during college was no longer there. It had been repossessed, as it was registered under the company's name. I had no home, no car, not a single bank card in my pocket. But I had my old laptop, a few engineering schematics on my hard drive, and an idea. An idea that I believed could change the way the world stored and used energy. I lifted my head to the Boston night sky, the wind tousling my hair, making me shiver slightly. $200 in my wallet, a dream in my heart, and nothing left to lose. That was the moment I knew. I was free. I boarded the last night bus out of Boston at 11:20 p.m., my destination, San Jose, the beating heart of America's tech industry. The journey lasted over 70 hours, during which I barely ate anything except a few crackers and a small water bottle that a kind passenger gave me. The night's cold seeped through my thin coat, but it wasn't as chilling as the feeling of being disowned by my family. When I stepped off the bus in San Jose, I had less than $120 left after paying for the ticket and travel expenses. I had no contacts here, no place to go. I dragged my suitcase out of the station, found a nearby park, and sat down on a wooden bench under a large oak tree. That night, I slept with my laptop as a pillow and an old scarf draped over me. I thought I would cry, that I would curse life, but I didn't. I only felt calm. Maybe because, for the first time, I had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I bought a sandwich and a small black coffee from a convenience store nearby, $7 in total. While sitting on a stone bench eating, I opened my old laptop and typed 3 lines on the first page of my digital notebook. I will never use the Preston name to achieve anything in life. I will create something that changes how the world uses energy. When I return, it will be on my own terms. I owe them nothing. After writing, I closed my laptop and looked up at the buildings in the distance, glowing under the rising sun. They seemed to whisper, telling me to start. But how do you begin when you don't even know what the first step is? I spent the entire day wandering through downtown San Jose's office districts, looking for part-time work, any job that would help me survive a few days. Everyone turned me down. No experience. Not hiring. We're downsizing. I heard the same lines so many times that they blurred together. By late afternoon, I sat down at a small cafe called Rust and Bean. While nursing a $2 iced tea to make use of the Wi-Fi for job applications, I noticed a middle-aged man struggling to fix a coffee machine that was making a strange noise. Maybe it was my engineer's instincts kicking in, but I stood up and asked, softly, "Do you need help?" I studied electrical mechanical engineering. At first, he hesitated, but after I pointed out that the strange hissing sound was caused by a misaligned pressure valve, he reluctantly let me try. 10 minutes later, the machine was running smoothly again. He looked at me, surprised. "How did you do that?" "I read the schematic and listened." I smiled. The man, Chuck, was the cafe owner. He not only let me sleep in the storage room upstairs, but also offered me a job as a maintenance assistant. Low pay, but enough to keep me afloat. I accepted immediately. The following days became a cycle of early mornings cleaning machines and checking equipment, and late nights refining my designs for a renewable energy storage project I had conceived back in my sophomore year of college. The technology was still unfinished, but I knew that if I could perfect it, it could revolutionize the way people stored solar energy. Something that was becoming more common, but still limited by current battery efficiency. One evening, while redrawing the core design, Maya, the cafe's only waitress, walked in. She glanced at my sketches and asked, "What are you working on? Looks like a treasure map." I laughed, flipping the page over to explain in the simplest terms. She listened intently, then suddenly said, "So if you make this work, electricity will be cheaper and more sustainable?" "Not just cheaper, safer, cleaner, and more adaptable. It could help remote areas become self-sufficient without relying on national grids." Maya didn't fully understand, but her smile made me feel that what I was pursuing wasn't just ambition. It was something that truly mattered. That night, I opened my laptop and created a new folder, naming it Aurora, the name for my battery project. I knew countless long nights and failures lay ahead. But I also knew one thing. I had started, and I wasn't going to stop. Not to prove anything to anyone, but because, for the first time, I was living for myself. "Excuse me," I asked gently, "is that the power distribution model for a multi-layer energy charging system?" The man looked up, surprised. "You know about this?" "I'm conducting research on energy storage systems. There are a few points in your schematic that could be optimized if you reduce the intermediary layers here." I pointed to a section of the diagram. He studied me intently, as if evaluating me. Then he smiled. "I'm Neil, lead engineer at Solenoid Tech. We're stuck on the problem of heat dissipation and power distribution in fluctuating pressure environments. If you truly understand what you just said, you might be able to help us." I didn't answer right away. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice steady. "Show me the real-time simulation data, and I'll try proposing an improvement." That evening, Neil and I stayed at the cafe until Maya turned off all the lights and kicked us both out. We continued talking just outside, sitting on the cafe steps. He handed me a business card. "Meet me on Monday. If what you're saying is right, I'll introduce you to someone you need to meet." I took the card, the yellow streetlight casting a glow on the words, "Solenoid Tech, David Neal, lead engineer. I knew I had just stepped up to the first door. I didn't know what lay beyond it yet, but that feeling, the feeling of being recognized for my ability, not my name, kept me awake that night. I arrived at the Solenoid Tech office on Monday morning with my old laptop, a stack of notes, and a dream folded inside my bag. The office was on the 4th floor of an old building. No flashy signs, no grand reception hall, just an open space filled with wires, components, and whiteboards covered in formulas. David Neal, the lead engineer, was holding a cup of coffee when I walked in. He gestured toward an empty desk. "You have 15 minutes. Impress me." I presented a solution for handling thermal oscillations by integrating a micropressure neutralization chamber, a technique I had independently researched during college but had never seen applied commercially. I backed it up with a simulated model and explained why their current approach was causing up to 17% efficiency loss in the system. David was silent for a long moment, then set his coffee down and nodded slowly. "I think you need to meet someone." A few days later, he took me to a research facility at the Santa Clara Institute of Technology, a private center collaborating on energy technology research. The person I was introduced to was Professor Monica Tran, an expert in applied electrochemistry and one of the pioneers in solid-state battery research in California. Monica wasn't easily impressed. The first meeting lasted nearly 4 hours, filled with sharp, scalpel-like questions. How do you ensure there's no energy dissipation in the distribution layer? Will the molecular structure in your simulation remain stable under triple the temperature fluctuation? Why use a biothermal conductive compound instead of industrial ceramics? I answered every question with everything I knew and everything I had learned on my own, from my university days to the late nights at Rust and Bean Cafe. When the session ended, Monica nodded at David. "Put her in the temporary research group. I want real-world testing within a month. If she's right, I'll grant her access to the Stanford Innovation Hub Energy Lab." I couldn't believe my ears. From a girl sleeping in a storage room, I was about to step into one of the top energy research facilities in the US, a place I had only dreamed of as a freshman. But I knew one thing. Every opportunity comes with high expectations. Failure was not an option. The 1-month trial in the research group was the most grueling period I had ever experienced. I worked morning shifts at the cafe, spent afternoons and evenings in the research team, then stayed up until 2 a.m. refining my models on my laptop. I learned how to measure intramolecular resistance with high-precision equipment, familiarize myself with nanocomposite materials, and simulate electromagnetic environments under extreme conditions. By the 4th week, I presented the first prototype of the Aurora design, a version ready for practical testing. Monica and 2 technical assistants spent an entire afternoon verifying the data. In the end, Monica simply said, "There's potential." 3 days later, I received an email. "Stanford Lab officially grants access to Margaret Preston. Project code, Aurora Beta." I stared at the words on the screen, my hands trembling. No one in the room knew that they had just opened a door for me, a door I had never been sure I would ever reach. The next few months were an endless journey forward. I moved out of the storage room and rented a small place near Stanford thanks to a research grant Monica helped me secure. I spent almost all my time in the lab, wearing a white coat, protective glasses, working with materials I had only read about in textbooks. By day, I ran experiments. By night, I wrote reports, redrew schematics, and optimized every single detail. There were nights when I collapsed asleep on my desk, waking up with tangled hair and a sore wrist. But not once did I feel exhausted in a way that made me want to quit. If anything, I felt alive, for the first time in a long time. Then, one October night, while testing the 3rd-generation Aurora prototype, the data displayed something no one had dared to hope for: a storage efficiency of 98.4%. A number never recorded before. I reran the test 3 times, using independent measuring devices, checking every circuit, every molecular layer. The result did not change. I sank into my chair, unable to believe my own eyes. A part of me wanted to scream. A part of me was afraid to breathe too hard. as if touching it too quickly would make it disappear. I sent the data to Monica with a short message. Breakthrough confirmed. Aurora is alive. 10 minutes later, she called. Margaret, do you realize what you've just done? I simply replied, I think I just rewrote a new chapter in energy storage. On the other end, Monica was silent for a moment, then exhaled. We need to prepare a presentation for the International Energy Conference next month. You will be the one presenting. I looked at the Aurora project logo on my laptop screen, a soft, swirling light representing energy that never fades. I had promised myself I would create something that changes the world. And now, I had just touched it. The International Energy Conference that year was held in Seattle. I stood on stage, bright lights shining directly on my face, while hundreds of scientists, investors, and global energy executives sat in the audience. When I presented Aurora, the first high-efficiency storage system reaching nearly 98.5% performance at 1/3 the cost of traditional lithium batteries, the hall fell completely silent. When I finished with, if renewable energy is the future, then Aurora is the key to unlocking it, the applause was thunderous. Some people stood. Monica sat in the front row, eyes glistening, while David squeezed my hand backstage, whispering, We're ready. Within 2 weeks after the conference, I received over 20 investment offers. One name stood out. Avery Capital, a venture capital firm in Austin, Texas, known for turning breakthrough tech ideas into billion-dollar empires. The invitation came from Raphael Lin, the firm's strategy director, a calm, sharp-eyed man who seemed to read thoughts. Our meeting took place in a small Mexican restaurant near the research facility. Raphael didn't waste time. I've been following you since Aurora was just a scribbled idea. Now it's a breakthrough. I want to invest $5 million for 22% equity in the company you're about to build. I gripped my glass, not answering immediately. Raphael took a sip of coffee and continued, as if reading my hesitation. Margaret, you don't need more people to dream with you. You need people who can turn that dream into reality, faster than anyone else out there. I was silent for a few seconds, then reached out my hand. We have a deal. Aurora Dynamics was founded the following spring, headquartered in San Mateo, inside a technology hub near the international airport. I was no longer the engineer sleeping on park benches or curled up in a cafe storage room. Now, I was the CEO, leading a team of over 30 people, including Maya, now the Chief Operating Officer, and David, Senior Technical Advisor. The first few months were a whirlwind, optimizing the supply chain, building the prototype production line, securing the first module manufacturing contracts, handling hundreds of legal documents. Each passing day, I felt both invigorated and constantly challenged. But not for a single moment did I feel lost. 1 year after receiving the initial investment, the first commercial version of Aurora Core was officially launched. Compact, sustainable, costing only half the price of lithium-ion batteries, yet lasting 3 times longer. In just 3 months, Aurora signed 17 supply contracts with solar energy companies across the U.S., from Arizona to Florida. The press called us the disruptor of the renewable energy game. I will never forget the first time I saw my product installed on the roof of a farm in New Mexico. Amidst dry fields where people once relied on old diesel generators for power. The farm owner, an elderly woman named Clara, took my hand and said, You've brought light here. Not just electricity, but hope. I couldn't hold back my tears. 3 years after Raphael signed the first check, Aurora Dynamics went public on NASDAQ. On the first day, the stock price doubled. By the end of the week, the company's valuation surpassed $720 million. My shares, after multiple investment rounds, were worth approximately $112 million. I still remember the feeling of watching the Bloomberg ticker display the news. Aurora Dynamics, the young woman who sparked a revolution. But I didn't celebrate with champagne or lavish parties. Instead, I returned to my office, opened my old laptop, the same one I once used as a pillow while sleeping in the park, and pulled up the first file I had ever written. I reread each of the 3 promises I had made to myself, my hands trembling. But this time, from happiness. I did not use the Preston name. I created something that truly changed how people use energy. And I returned not to beg or seek validation, but as someone who had broken through every limit on my own. Yet deep down, I knew there was still one thing left unfinished. I had not returned to the place that cast me out. The house where I was once thrown $200, as if that was all I was worth. And this time, I wasn't coming back for revenge. I was coming back to prove that light always finds its way home. I never thought that day would come so soon. At the end of Q2, a headline on CNBC caught the attention of the entire Aurora Dynamics team. Preston Equity, the long-standing Boston investment firm, faces takeover risk after consecutive quarters of losses. I stared at the name on the screen. I didn't need to read the full report. Preston Equity was the company my father, Edward Preston, had built and run for 3 decades. The same company he had once expected me to join as part of the family tradition, before tossing me $200 and cutting me off. The news reported that the company was in turmoil, outdated investment portfolios, sluggish response to emerging technologies, and a mass exodus of partners. Worse still, they were facing a quiet acquisition attempt from a tech conglomerate called Equinox Holdings, a name that had never publicly appeared in the market but was clearly backed by substantial financial power. I pressed my lips together and turned to Raphael, who stood beside me. His eyes told me he already knew what I was thinking. "It's us, isn't it?" I asked quietly. Raphael nodded. Equinox is the subsidiary we established last year to acquire legacy assets that need transformation. Preston Equity is one of our targets. So far, no one inside the company knows who truly owns it. I leaned back in my chair, my mind swirling. I had spent my entire youth living under the heavy shadow of the Preston name. A family bound to wealth and power, but devoid of understanding or love. And now, in a cruel twist of fate, I was the one holding the power to decide the future of the very empire my father once used to disown me. 1 week later, I arrived in Boston. The Preston Equity office building hadn't changed. Cold gray granite walls, heavy dark wood doors, and the gold-lettered Preston and Partners sign hanging proudly above the entrance. But this time, I wasn't entering as a cast-out daughter. I was the CEO of Aurora Dynamics, and the majority stakeholder of Equinox Holdings, the company now controlling 48% of Preston Equity. The man who greeted me was Warren Stokes, the firm's vice chairman, an old, cautious, and discreet man. "This way, miss. Mr. Preston is in a board meeting. He didn't recognize me." I nodded and walked down the familiar hallway, lined with the same oil paintings I had seen throughout my childhood. The 10th floor conference room, once off limits to me, was now where I sat at the head of the table, a folder of documents placed before me. I waited. The door swung open. My father walked in. His hair was grayer, his stance less firm than before. His eyes swept past me, not recognizing me at first. He began speaking in the same commanding tone that had once silenced rooms full of executives. "Ladies and gentlemen, we need to have a serious discussion about the threat from Equinox Holdings." "No need to worry, Father," I interrupted, lifting my gaze. The room fell completely silent. His eyes finally landed on me, and for the first time, he recognized me. "Margaret." I nodded and smiled, calm. "Hello, Father. It's been a long time." One of the board members stammered. You're behind Equinox?" I opened the folder and slid it toward my father. "Equinox Holdings is a subsidiary of Aurora Dynamics, and I am the one who authorized the takeover." My father froze, his eyes locked on the documents. His hand trembled slightly. "Why?" His voice was hoarse, no longer the sharp tone I once feared. I answered slowly, deliberately. "Because you once taught me that a person's worth is defined by what they can create. Today I return to prove you were right, just not in the way you expected." Warren Stokes interjected. Ms. Margaret, what do you want from this deal? I looked him straight in the eye. I don't want to destroy Preston equity. I want to save it. But to do that, I need to change everything, from its business model and personnel to its investment strategy. The company will be merged into Aurora's green technology ecosystem. The Preston name will be no more. My father gripped the armrest of his chair tightly. You're willing to bury an entire legacy just for your pride? I stood up, my voice calm but firm. Not for pride, for the future. I left the boardroom, silence trailing behind me. As I stepped into the elevator, I heard my father call out, "Margaret!" I didn't turn back. Less than 2 hours after the board meeting, I sat in Equinox Holdings' temporary office, the 19th floor of a sleek glass building just 3 blocks from Preston Equity's headquarters. 2 phones rang non-stop on my desk, dozens of emails awaited responses, and a live financial transaction dashboard flashed constantly with numbers. I had no time for hesitation. By that afternoon, my legal team sent an official proposal to the entire Preston Equity Board, a full merger into Aurora's ecosystem, complete rebranding, executive restructuring, and the complete removal of the Preston family's management rights. Attached was a warning. If the board failed to accept within 24 hours, Equinox would activate a pre-planned financial clause, calling in the debts Preston Equity owed to satellite investment branches that I had, quietly, taken control of over the past year. The exit door had been locked. That evening, I received a call from Warren Stokes. Margaret. His voice was low. Edward is rallying his remaining loyalists to block your proposal, but with the current share distribution, he can't stop the process if you move forward. I replied evenly. I didn't come to ask for permission. I came to finish this. The next morning at exactly 8 a.m., Preston Equity's board convened an emergency meeting. I wasn't there in person, but my legal team, representing Equinox Holdings, presented every merger clause in language that left no room for interpretation. When they reached the proposal to rename the company Aurora Capital, Warren glanced around the table, then quietly nodded. A board member raised a hand. Who will lead after the merger? My attorney replied smoothly. The current board will be dissolved. The new executive structure will be appointed by Aurora Dynamics, effective tomorrow. A heavy silence filled the room. Then a voice broke through, dry, firm, and familiar. No, I don't accept this. My father stood up, tapping his hand lightly against the ebony wood table. His gaze still carried the authority it once held, despite his hair now nearly all gray. You think you can erase 40 years of legacy with just a few signatures? Have you all forgotten that this institution built the Northeast investment sector? That the Preston name once stood for credibility and tradition? I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Every eye in the room turned toward me. Precisely because the Preston name once carried such weight? I spoke slowly. It must end at the right moment, before it becomes a symbol of stagnation and outdated thinking. My father turned toward me. For a brief moment, I saw shock flicker across his face. You don't have to do this, Margaret. I walked to the table and placed the finalized proposal before him. I'm not doing this for revenge, I said, my voice steady. I'm doing this to fix what you let wither away in complacency. His fists clenched. You would erase everything, just to prove yourself? I shook my head. I've already proven myself. Without Preston, without an inheritance. Only with an idea you once called foolish and the $200 you threw on the floor. Every board member remained silent. Warren was the first to sign the proposal. Then, one by one, the others followed. Slowly but decisively, like dominoes falling in an unbroken sequence. In the end, only my father remained, the founder, the man who once believed he would be immortal on his throne of financial power. I slid the pen toward him. I'm not forcing you to sign, but if you don't, the shareholders will vote. And The decision will still be executed. He looked at me, his gaze filled with both regret and resignation. Then, he signed. The final contract was sealed at 5:48 p.m. Preston Equity, a name once tied to the very bloodline of a family, officially became part of Aurora Capital, under my leadership. As I walked out of the building, the Boston sky burned red, as if flaring one last time to bid farewell to an era. I didn't feel victorious, nor did I feel resentful. There was only a strange sense of closure, as if I had finally shut a chapter I had been afraid to open for years. My father stood at the doorway, watching. He didn't call my name again. After the merger, I spent nearly 8 months completely restructuring Preston Equity now Aurora Capital. Outdated, bloated investment portfolios were replaced with clean technology projects, renewable energy, and sustainable infrastructure. We expanded into multi-layered energy storage, green agriculture, and smart urban redevelopment. Under new leadership, the company was no longer a symbol of the past, but a driving force of innovation. I kept none of the old executives, not out of revenge, but because to build the future, we cannot anchor ourselves to what once held us back. My father, Edward Preston, quietly stepped away. He no longer appeared in the media or attended industry events. He moved to the lake house that once served as our summer retreat. A quiet place, far from the city, from the headlines, from the spotlight that had once defined his life. My mother sent me a handwritten letter after the deal was finalized. She wrote that she had been following every step I took, from the first article that mentioned Margaret Preston, the golden girl of renewable energy, to the day I officially took control of the company that bore our family's name. She said she was proud, that she had been wrong to stay silent all those years, that she wanted to see me. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I had learned that some distances cannot be bridged by a few late apologies. 1 year passed since the day I walked out of that boardroom with a historic contract. I continued to lead Aurora Dynamics, expanding into Europe and Southeast Asia. The second-generation Aurora Core project, smaller, cheaper, more powerful, had just been granted global patents. One early winter morning, Maya, now the chief operating officer at headquarters, walked into my office, holding a light brown envelope. "You got something in the mail," she said, placing it on my desk. I opened it. Inside was another smaller white envelope with no sender's name. When I pulled it out, my heart clenched slightly. A folded piece of paper. And tucked inside were 2 old $100 bills carefully pressed flat. Beneath them, in a firm but slightly slanted handwriting, was a single line. "You are worth more than I ever knew. Edward." I sat in silence for a long time, not because of the money itself, but because, for the first time in 24 years, my father admitted his mistake in the only language I had ever understood from him. Action. That afternoon, I left work early and drove back to the old district, to a small cafe called Rust and Bean, the place where it all began. The cafe was unchanged, faded wooden doors, a blackboard menu written in chalk, and the familiar scent of roasted coffee drifting through old brick walls. Chuck, the old owner, had retired, passing the cafe down to his daughter. But the coffee machine I once fixed years ago was still there, still running, perfectly. I sat down by the window seat, the same spot where I had first sketched the Aurora design on my worn-out laptop screen. Ordering a cappuccino and a croissant, I pulled the envelope from my wallet, took out the 2 old bills, placed them on the table, and wrote on a napkin. This was my starting point, keep it, to remember that great things can begin in the humblest of places. I handed it to the waitress with a smile. "Please give this to the owner. It's a tip." Then, I walked out of the cafe, the golden hues of the setting sun casting a warm glow behind me. I had once left home with a small suitcase, a laptop, and $200 thrown at my feet. I returned with a company worth hundreds of millions, thousands of employees, and a mission greater than myself. But my true worth wasn't measured in those numbers. What I had learned was this: a person's value is not defined by where they were born, not by the name they carry, but by what they choose to build with what they have. And sometimes, something as small as 2 dismissed banknotes can be the beginning of an empire. From a rejected girl with $200 and a dream deemed foolish, I built an empire that changed the way the world uses energy. But this journey was never about proving my worth to others. It was about proving to myself that where we start does not determine where we end. What matters is that we dare to begin, dare to persist, and dare to create. I did not become who I am despite my past. I became who I am because of it. And now I live as myself, not seeking validation, only ensuring that I have no regrets.